Why do some melodies get stuck in your head instantly, whereas others are instantly forgotten? It's not random, there's science behind making catchy melodies, and I'm going to show you all the techniques you can use to get your melodies and your tracks remembered for decades to come. When creating a chord progression, you can go and choose what's already worked and been proven to work in hit songs by going and using chord progressions like these. Go and select a scale. For example, I'm going to go into View, Scale Highlighting, and select C minor. And if you look at the Roman numeral notation, go and pick the notes these Roman numerals correspond to. We have this note here on 1, 5, 6, and then 4. If the Roman numeral is uppercase, it's a major chord. If it's lowercase, it's a minor chord. So all three of these are major, except for the third one. There's some really helpful sites like this one here, and you can actually download the MIDI for the top chord progressions. You can go and drag them in like this. We also have some free MIDI packs that you can use, which have awesome chord progressions that are super catchy and super great for starting tracks. So method 0 is using a chord progression that's already been proven to work. The next step is repetition. Brains love patterns, and it can be really satisfying to know what's going to come next or hear a really catchy part of the melody again. I'm going to jump into D sharp minor. I'm going to make a minor chord progression and just show you how powerful this is. Do you recognize this song? A chord progression this simple led to a diamond track. I had this chord progression here. And as you'll notice, this last chord here is hitting twice. I used to never use the same chord twice in a chord progression because I thought it was lazy or boring. But if you have a look at top songs and the chord progressions behind them, a lot of them use either the same chord progressions or it'll literally be one chord that they duplicate and change the note once or twice. Remember, there's going to be melodic layers on top of this chord progression, like counter melodies, supporting melodies, vocals, or bass lines. So having a catchy chord progression that uses some repetition doesn't make the track sound boring and flat. It can be the perfect starting point. The second technique to making catchy melodies is surprise. You can throw in some chord extensions or even some notes that are technically out of scale, and it's going to surprise your listeners and really wake them up and get their attention. For example, we have the chord progression from before, but I added this extra chord here, and you can get really creative with this if you like. And pick any of the notes in the scale, and it's really going to jump out and sound unique. And one thing you can do to make this a little bit less over the top is go and duplicate the chord progression, go and remove it from the first iteration, and go and have it just at the very end here. You don't just have to use the chord progression to add this surprise. You can do it with a bass line, for example. Adding in some higher pitched notes or some slides. You can also do it with a counter melody. For example, I'm going to grab a sound like a pluck. You can go and arpeggiate this. Go and add in some of those extra notes. And the third way, which is one of my favorites, is to humanize the melody or make it sound less robotic. One great way to do this is with sound selection. If you pick some cool sounds that don't sound super basic, it can add such an extra element to your melodies. I think one of the best examples of this is the production behind Don Toliver. A lot of the melodies are crazy spacey and the timing for them is slightly different. You have the basic chord progression and you have the supporting melody or counter melody that comes on top of that. But those melodies tend to come in before or after the chord change, which makes it sound really trippy. I delayed this arpeggio and it gets that same kind of effect. And you can do the opposite, for example, if we remove this last note and advance the melody slightly. Depending on the type of track you're trying to create, this might sound a bit messy or overcomplicated, but if you feel there's room to make the melody more exciting, this can be a perfect trick. Another way to make a melody sound less robotic is by going and randomizing it. You could go and play this on a piano, and that's going to sound different because the velocity and the timing is different. One way to do this inside your DAW, select your notes, click on this spanner here, go into randomize, and you can change the pan around, you can change the velocity around, and some other settings here like the release. It can make a melody feel so much more natural. You can also use plugins to get this element of surprise. For example, we can choose a basic one inside a gross beat. hope you use these techniques to create some really catchy melodies and chord progressions. If you want some awesome melody packs, which are free and royalty free, click the link in the description. And if you want to see how top producers create catchy melodies, create their beats, or mix their tracks, click one of the recommended videos.